everyone. My name's Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, celebrating classic horror throughout history with new episodes every Friday night. Tonight, we're going to be celebrating a true blue exploitation monsterpiece, 1980's Humanoids from the Deep, produced by Martin B. Cohen and Roger Corman, and directed, at least in part, by Barbara Peeters.
Humanoids from the Deep. They began in the water. They're not human, but they hunt human women. Not for killing, for mating.
Why the girls?
It's my theory that these creatures are driven to mate with man now, in order to further develop their incredible evolution.
Humanoids from the deep. Anywhere you run, any place you hide, any time you stop, they will find you. Humanoids from the deep.
It's time to celebrate this 1980 Roger Corman produced classic. We've got an awesome panel to chat about it with me. Let's bring everybody in and let's say hello to Ryan Olson and Jen Olson.
Hello.
Damian Glonick.
Hey, everybody.
Beaming in from Brussels, Vanessa Morgan.
Hello.
And rounding out our panel from the Great White North, John W. Bowen.
Noyo.
And we're going to be chatting about Humanoids from the Deep, 1980, celebrating its 45th anniversary. My goodness. Thanks for coming on the show, everybody, and welcome. So this is a film that I saw way back in the day. I want to say like on Elvira, maybe hosting. I didn't remember anything except for that crazy ending, which seemed, vaguely reminiscent of another monster movie that had come out the year before. I'm referring to Alien, of course. But that was such a startling image. And so even though I recognized that it was a ripoff thereof, it still was quite effective. But going back and revisiting it on subsequent views, the monsters, that really resonated for me as well. Jen and Ryan, when did you come across this movie for the first time?
Ryan actually introduced me to it about, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, sometime. Yeah. For myself, I was always aware of the film and the title. I always thought it was a great title, but I actually didn't see it until in the early 2000s-ish, because my good buddy Dave from Liquid Cheese, he actually got a copy of the Japanese import on DVD. And that was important because it was the only way you could see the film completely uncut. And it also featured the fantastic monster art, which I love. Ever since he showed it to me, the one night we watched it, I've been obsessed with the movie. It's, in my top 20 all-time favorites, and I love it to pieces. It's great.
And when you say monster art, that has dual meaning because it was dubbed, the title being Monster, for its European release. And we also saw some poster art that was just the term monster. I agree, Humanoids from the Deep is a far superior title. Jen, what was your reaction when Ryan sat you down with it?
I love a good old monster movie. So I loved it. I'm a big fan of Creature from the Black Lagoon. So I also loved that whole aspect of it. The animal, like the dog violence, I wasn't a fan of. I can watch brutal movies all day, but you hurt a dog and I'm like, no. And of course the raping was, not my cup of tea, but I loved the movie in general. It was great. It was fun.
Well, and I think this is a movie that doesn't it takes no prisoners in terms of we got a kid getting murdered in the first 5 minutes. Yeah. We've got dogs being menaced. It's pretty hardcore exploitation. Damian, how about you? When did you come across this one?
I first saw this movie when it first aired on HBO. I guess it was probably maybe 81, 82 after it was released. It was a summer. I was staying at my aunt's house by myself, so I'm just watching HBO all the time, and this came on, and I was so mesmerized by the monsters and everything in it that I pretty much watched every screening every time it was on HBO the entire summer. I just absolutely love this movie. As I got older, I came to appreciate it more, and I'm a sucker for sea monster movies. and this is probably the greatest one.
Awesome. Vanessa.
Well, the Monster Party started quite late for me. I think I watched it for the first time something like 15 years ago. And I think it's quite weird because I went to quite a lot of video stores when I was very young, but I never came across this film here in Belgium. And then at a certain point, like 15 years ago, there was a friend who said, "Hey, I just found a film. You might be interested in watching this." And that was Humanoids from the Deep. And I instantly fell in love with that film. I had something like, okay, I think at one point Roger Corman woke up and he said, "I'm going to make a movie for Vanessa Morgan." And that was Humanoids from the Deep.
Awesome. We will dive deep into the things that appeal. John, how about you?
I'm trying to remember the specifics, but I know it was one of many things I was first exposed to at the drive-in. I saw a lot of classic 70s and early 80s stuff at the drive-in when it was sort of on the second run. I mean, that's where actually it might have been current at the time, but everything, so many other movies that I saw around the same time were sort of getting brought back on the drive-in and grindhouse circuit. That's because that's where I first saw, The Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw. They used to do these all-night horror shows at the two drive-ins here in Kingston. So probably one of those. And then of course later on VHS, me with two VCRs dubbing one under the other. And I don't care if the picture quality is shit. It's mine, all mine now. So that was pretty much it, I think, for me.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about what is Humanoids from the Deep. Ryan, I know you have a vintage review from Mr. Chaz Balin.
Yeah, it's in the gore score, and I mean it pretty much sums up the movie quite succinctly, I think, and it's pretty memorable. Salmon men rape girls and kick ass in this quickly paced and scary and amusing monster pick from Roger Corman. Great creature and effects are by Rob Bottin.
And that is pretty succinct. It is a great, as Jen was referencing, it is definitely kind of a spin-off of Creature from the Black Lagoon, in that we have a monster, or monsters in this case, that are transfixed by the beauty of human women. But in this case, they have been mutated salmon that are trying to procreate their race because they're only male for some reason. These creatures do have kind of a Creature from the Black Lagoon look to them. They also look a lot like, as John and I were talking backstage, the creatures from Horror of Party Beach, which we talked about, Damien and John and I, a couple months ago when we talked about our Turkey Day episode. So let's talk about the monsters.
They don't hide them in shadow. They're right out in broad day for you to see, and they look great. Bottin did such a fantastic job on the looks.
I forget how prolific Bottin was back then, and he was just a young guy too. I mean, there's so many things that just I'll see his name in the credits, like shit, I forgot he was behind that. So many things from back then, and he was when he did The Fog, he was 23 or something. Yeah, he did a lot with a little on that too. I mean, that's. People will say, "Oh, it's obviously a rubber monster suit," but who made better rubber monster suits?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It still looks fantastic.
They look great.
They only have like two.
I think they had three. They had three at one point, but you could only shoot them. There was only one that was like functional, and they had two others you kind of had to shoot from a certain angle in order to cover the seams.
Yeah. But it made it seem like there was an army of them.
Exactly.
It looks a lot. It looks, a lot of shots. Like one of them is way shorter than the others too.
Yeah.
The one that looks like it could actually be a child. I'm not sure whether it was supposed to be like a half-grown one or not.
And the one suit had like really long arms.
Yeah, yeah. The one which they use at the in the sort of alternate climax there, where what's her name is alone in the house.
Yeah,
that's the one that comes to the window there, because that's the one shot where you really see how crazy long the limbs are.
Well, one other thing to really note too is that aside from Bottin that worked on this, you had Steve Johnson and Chris Wallace. Right. And Chris Wallace was not credited. A couple of powerhouse special effects guys working with legendary, I mean, they're all three legends basically. So, I mean, you got a heck of a team there working on that stuff just from the get-go with just those three guys.
Basically, that idea of these mutated salmon, the plot is that, in this village of Noyo, they are trying to get a cannery to come in for their salmon industry. And in order to boost the productivity of the salmon, they've introduced this chemical into the water. And that, of course, leads to the mutations. All through the 70s, we had that eco-horror boom.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the culmination of that. Vanessa, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's always something that has always fascinated me, the eco-horror movie genre, because it's so tied to everything that happened, especially during that period. The fear of people, like people being afraid of pesticides. DDT was a big one. Genetic manipulation was another big thing. I remember there was a book at a certain point in the 1960s. I think it was Rachel Carson who started really mentioning the dangers of using these things. And it really sank into people's spirits and minds. Everyone started to be afraid of it. Things like DDT got banned also in the early 70s, in 1972. And all these fears, they were translated onto the big screen. So you have so many eco-horror movies. You have them, of course, all throughout film history, but especially the 1970s. There was really a boom for that sort of film. And of course, here we're talking about the manipulation of the salmon to make them grow bigger. So yeah, the typical example of that sort of film.
Well, and I feel like this is kind of like the eco-horror took over from the fear of radiation from the 50s and 60s. Like it was just one more thing that we can be like, you know, radiation is played out. Let's do something else. And it's going to be, chemicals, you know, putting chemicals in the water. But we had that whole boom from like the early 70s with like frogs, and then on to like Food of the Gods, Empire of the Ants, things like that. So it feels like this is kind of a culmination. In addition to the big, like the Jaws influence, like I feel like this is kind of a nice combination of Nature Strikes Back and man's tampering with nature.
I wanted to say, I'm not sure if Roger Corman was actually that interested in eco-horror specifically, or in the political aspects of it. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for me, for him, it was more like just the commercial aspect. It was really popular, especially with Jaws that came out like 5 years earlier. And for him, it was just like, from a commercial standpoint, it was interesting to make that sort of movie. I don't think there was any political agenda behind it.
No, I would say that's probably true, that he was just, following the money.
I think so.
Roger Corman was interested in money.
Exactly.
That was it.
Well, his mandate to Barbara Peeters was, they kill all the men and rape all the women. Yeah. He said that's the only thing he told her when she was making the movie. He even said he even reiterated to her. He's like, they kill all the men and rape all the women, and that's what he wanted to have on the screen.
Corman, he wasn't that big on messages in a lot of his movies, but he was always decidedly left leaning. That's for sure. And also, I mean, this is the guy who made Intruder years before that. If you look at the way just everybody's underlying fears get sort of dragged out into horror films, the environmental ones of that period, you could be a lot more literal with those than with others. Like if you look at The Hills Have Eyes, which had all this subtext about American foreign policy and Vietnam and whatnot, and there's some of that in Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. It's down much deeper, whereas as anything environmental, you could do right on the surface with, like Aaron says, to all the atomic theme stuff as well. You didn't have to rely on pure subtext as much. You could be much more upfront about it.
And I mean, we're talking like heavy messages here, but really at its heart, I think this is just a fun monster movie that Corman was looking to create an exploitation film that would capitalize on the popularity of the eco-horror of Jaws, etc. Damien, being that you kind of had this on heavy rotation back in the 80s, what are some of your favorite moments or themes that run throughout Humanoids from the Deep?
As a young kid, I was just enamored by the monster. So anytime a monster was on screen, I loved it, especially the first beach attack when the couple's out in the water and she, like, her boyfriend's like kind of slumped over and she turns him around and half his face is missing. So as a young kid, I'm like, yes, this is amazing. And then just to see like those creatures on the beach and like I said, in sunlight, full figured, it was just like, as a little kid, like, I love monsters, and here it is, like a perfect monster, not hidden, in color, It was fantastic. I was just enamored by how elaborate they made the monsters and like the amount of blood and stuff. I mean, early 80s, right? I mean, anything goes. So there was no holding back. They definitely had a lot of the gore and stuff just right there in front of you to see. And you know, I guess as Joe Bob Briggs says, blood, boobs, beast make the perfect movie, and this had it all. So as a fledgling young horror fan, this was on top of my my list for sure.
And let's talk a little bit about kind of that monster design. We talked a little bit about kind of the freakishly long arms, but they've also got like this it's just kind of an alien-esque face with teeth and then like this massive brain in the back that proves to be a vulnerable spot for them. Several of the creatures get themselves, you know, bashed in the noggin, and that takes them out.
I guess salmon have no skulls, so these things
they are pretty hard to take down. Aside from that, though, because I mean, they get shot quite a bit, and they still keep coming.
Yeah.
Not to mention, what is that drain cleaner at the end there? Or
yeah, the Drano stuff. Yeah.
Drano, yeah.
And rewatching it this time again, when they're pouring all the gasoline in the water and then light it up, I'm like, what does that even do?
Right, right.
And not even that much of it goes up, really.
Right.
Yeah.
That's on repeated viewings. I'm going, come on, that's like a little bit. Not exactly.
And they get so lucky that they're like in the water freaking out, you know, just outside of the flames.
Yeah, it's like, I think you got 2 of them. Meanwhile, there's another 12 on the boardwalk.
And Corman, you know, Corman was renowned for giving opportunities to young directors, and Barbara Peeters was one of those. She had done one other film under his heading that was produced by his wife, Julie Corman, Summer School Teachers from 1975. So this was another go-around under the Corman umbrella. And she was approaching this, you know, I mean, Summer School Teachers, as you might guess from the title, is another exploitation film, and there is nudity involved. But there was some controversy surrounding this film in particular, because the film that Barbara Peeters shot was not necessarily the film that all of us came to see.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting what happened because, like you guys said before, Roger Corman told Barbara Peeters, like, okay, I want the monsters to kill all the men and to rape all the women. And of course, being a woman, she didn't really like the part of monsters raping women. And so she never really shot those scenes. She always like suggested it, like if it happened off screen, but apparently in the gore department, she was quite good. But the idea was more for her, like to make something atmospheric, more like almost a psychological thriller, apparently. And it also had a different name, Beneath the Darkness. So it was something completely different. And when Corman saw the result, he was like, no way, this is not going to make money. I'm not going to show this to my audience. And so he hired another director. Yeah, he shot all the rape scenes, but also he added all the things with the teenagers, with the nudity. And it just became an entirely different film. And apparently Barbara Peeters, she didn't know anything about it. So afterwards she saw the film, and of course she was shocked, like, okay, this is not a film that I shot. And from what I heard, she decided to not do any feature films anymore after that because it was such a bad experience.
It wasn't just Barbara that was shocked by it. It was most of the cast and crew and the actors and stuff. Yeah. Ann Turkel was extremely upset about the movie to the point of where she went to the Screen Actors Guild and tried to get the movie stopped from being released. She was and took it on talk shows and did that stuff. And, you know, Peeters spoke out about it, you know, and said that she made comments. She said, I'm not opposed to shooting nudity, but only when it was integrated into the story. I've never shot rape or violence towards women or things that would be mean or degrading. She goes, I'm goddamn mad. She was obviously not happy about
And what do you guys think? Do you think like Roger Corman was right in shooting those new scenes and in asking for like an entirely different film? Or do you think like he should have followed, you know, Barbara Peeters' initial film?
According to him, like I interviewed him about mainly about humanoids, a couple of other things as well. But his version was that he was very, very clear about what it was supposed to be with her, and that she went completely against his orders on it. that if she found it that objectionable, she shouldn't have done it in the first place. I told her, Barbara, kill the men and rape the women. So his version is that she knew full well what she was supposed to do and then didn't do it. And also according to him, he said that he even found some of her attacks on the men like a little too strong. He was afraid of getting an X rating or something because of that she just really went way the hell over the top with those. So this is his version anyway, was that it was all made very plain to her to begin with. So if she found it that objectionable, she shouldn't have done it.
He obviously had an agenda first. I mean, the title of this movie was Beneath the Darkness, just to lure everyone in so it wouldn't seem like an exploitive monster movie. And then once everything's done, completely change the title on everybody.
So it becomes
the Deep, which is, I was just thinking the other day, it's a shame, you don't see movies with titles like this anymore, or a movie title with like blood or something in the title of the movie. It's all much more subdued. They don't have those crazy exploitive horror movie titles out in theaters anymore on anything.
Really, this one is playing the exploitation card really hard. And I think, I guess it's easy to say, 45 years ago, it was a different time. But I feel like Corman felt like you needed to have that nudity. That's what was going to get people in the door. And watching it this time around, I was actually going, you know what? Maybe we don't need as much of this nudity. Maybe it would have survived on the gore and the monsters and just the pace of it. I think the acting and the story is actually pretty solid. I hesitate to say I don't feel like the rape is as explicit. Like I feel like in some ways there's a lot of suggestion. It's like a monster falling on top of the woman.
Right.
Yeah.
But we don't actually see them like rutting away. I think that would have been, a bridge too far.
Yeah.
But watching it now again, with 2025 eyes, it does seem like it's milder than it might have seemed back in the day. But again, if you had shot a film and then you sat down to watch it and all of this stuff had been inserted, I think I would probably feel betrayed as well.
Part of me thinks, well, maybe in the aftermath, both of them were being a little disingenuous about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always a little suspicious of both sides in that situation. Maybe he was less specific to her than he claimed he had been, and I think maybe on her part there was maybe a little less moral outrage than there was about having her work messed with.
Right.
After the fact, because she's a director, that they get a little sensitive about that, no matter what it was that was messed with. Yeah, I've certainly, but Aaron, to your point, I've certainly seen much more explicit rape scenes especially from that era.
Right.
Well, look at Roger Corman's Galaxy of Terror.
Right.
Yeah.
That scene where that giant maggot thing.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, where did this scene even fit into this movie?
Yeah.
This giant maggot rapes this girl. I'm like, what the hell is happening here? That's Corman to stick something in there that'll be exploitive to get the crowds there.
Well, and get people talking about it. You got to see this.
If he would have at least let her know what he was doing ahead of time, maybe showed her or said, okay, I appreciate the stuff that you did, but we need more of this, so I'm going to do this. But at least keep her clued in, as opposed to just, okay, we're going to go shoot all this stuff and cut this version of the movie. And then when the cast and crew actually went and saw it, is the first time that they saw, and none of them had an idea about it. I mean, the actress that plays Doug McClure's wife talks about it in the extras on the Shout Factory disc about how, we had no idea when we went to the screening. And then all of a sudden we're watching this and going, wait a minute, what's all this and that? And she had even the thing where, they asked her if she'd do nudity and she said no. So they said, okay. So they went and brought in another girl and put her behind the shower thing, and it's funny. She also comments on the fact that her figure is nothing like hers. It's obviously more buxom. And, they went and did that and went around it in that way. And it's like, well, let them know if you're going to do that stuff.
I mean, we understand this is show business, and there's a business side of it. And if this is what Corman felt like he needed to have in there to make it a successful film, which it was. I mean, that's at the end of the day, it was a modest financial success. But yes, to your point, I don't know that he ever went back to her and said, hey, we need to spice this up. I've heard there's differing as to who went back and shot the stuff. Some reports say it's Jimmy Murakami. Also, the second unit director, James.
That's what I heard.
Spartalotti. Yeah.
He's on the extras saying that he shot the stuff.
Yeah,
that's right. That's what Corman.
Yeah, it's interesting to see like Murakami shows up on IMDb and Wikipedia, but
I mean,
maybe
overall,
it was different people altogether. We'll never really get to the truth of it, I think.
Maybe Corman had a bunch of different people shooting it.
And I can hardly, I hardly believe that this is the only time that ever happened on a Corman movie.
Oh, I mean, right.
Yeah, no.
I mean, on The Terror, we have 15 different directors. Everybody just takes over one each week.
Yeah, including Jack Nicholson.
Barbara Peeters' strength as a director. I mean, I think that opening sequence with where they all go out on the boats, and then you have the guys hooking it with the net, and then the kid falls in the water, and the gas spills over in the big explosion. Like, we are off to the races within the first 10 minutes. I think it's a really solid action set piece that, culminates in kids getting killed. I mean, it's a really fun piece. And I think from an exploitation standpoint, Barbara Peeters knew what she was supposed to do, even if she didn't follow through on the nudity side of it.
It was definitely made by people who knew what was required, and yet knew how to make it all very cohesive at the same time, while serving all the agendas that way.
From the very beginning, you see a creature's hand ripping through the net. I mean, there's no hiding what this movie is about and where it's going. Like you said, they're immediately starting things off.
And I agree with you, Aaron, when you say that I don't think, honestly, that everything that was added afterwards, all the nudity, the rape scenes, the teenagers, that this was really necessary. This is not, in my eyes, what makes the movie good. What makes the movie good are the monsters, the pacing, certainly the locations as well.
Yeah, it's a really good-looking film.
And there's a lot of extra stuff that they didn't even throw in. I mean, if you look at the special features again on the disc, some of the deleted scenes, there's more nudity and there's more teenager stuff. And one particular scene that I thought they should have left in was with the girl fishing in the water, and she gets dragged off, and you see her getting pulled out to sea. You don't see her. All you see is the wave. I thought that was a pretty cool effect of how they did that.
Yeah.
But I mean, even with all the stuff that's in there, there's still even more that they left out.
Yeah, and how often is there actually leftover nudity for a Corman?
Right.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. I mean, really.
Weird. That can't have happened too many times, I don't think.
The production team on this one's pretty solid. We have Mark Goldblatt is our editor, and he really cuts this thing together. And he's gone on to really big things. Worked with James Cameron on Terminator 2, True Lies. Worked with Paul Verhoeven on Starship Troopers. He's somebody who definitely got his start under Corman and then went on to do some really great things. But we also have a score by Oscar winner James Horner.
Yeah.
Which again, I think is very effective. I think the whole thing feels like a really polished affair, and you can't just dismiss it as a low budget monster movie.
Another person that got their start with Corman too is Gail Ann Hurd. She was a production assistant on this. And we all know all the stuff she's been involved with. So
so many people. It's something that Roger Corman really did quite often. He was just looking for people with a lot of talent, but that weren't very big names yet. And then, they became famous afterwards, thanks to their awesome work. But
and also there were for every James Horner or James Cameron or Gail Ann Hurd, there are a lot of other people who aren't household names, but went on to very successful careers, like Barbara Peeters. She had like a long and very successful career in TV, like in network TV.
Yep.
As well. And there's a lot of those, like tons of those from Corman.
I do want to kind of like circle back to the movie itself. We have actors Doug McClure, Vic Morrow. So we have some really solid kind of like B-movie stalwarts. Doug McClure was somebody I had grown up watching in the Edgar Rice Burroughs films that Amicus did, The Land That Time Forgot, The People That Time Forgot, At the Earth's Core. He does a really solid job here. I think he's a little past his prime, but I find him to be an engaging hero in this regard. And then Vic Morrow.
Oh, man.
I don't think they could have found a more perfect person than Vic Morrow to play that role.
Yeah, and he's also in The Last Shark, no?
Yes.
So So it's a role that suits him.
Yep.
Just a total career of playing heels. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen him in where he wasn't a total dick.
I first saw him in Bad News Bears. I think that was the first time I'd ever seen.
He was great in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, a dick.
Yeah. Yeah, and also
then,
the kind of a multi-layered dick in that one.
And then he went out doing Twilight Zone, the movie. There was that tragic accident on the set of that. But once again, he's playing a character that is a racist, bigot, misogynist. You're like, yep, Vic Morrow knew what he could. Now, I think in this movie, he gets one moment of redemption in that he trying to save the kid. And so he climbs down.
You know what he was doing in the
himself in danger.
Twilight Zone movie too, though?
Yeah.
Yeah,
because he's a racist bigot in this too, as well. But it's ironic, after he blows up the Eagles place with that very lucky one Molotov cocktail.
Yeah, right.
He,
I don't
He
know what
hits a
Johnny
gas
Eagle
line.
had in his cabin, but yeah.
right, exactly. He ends up, kind of like you said, trying to redeem himself by saving the kid. And then, I mean, Eagle himself even ends up helping save him. And they all come together in the face of this grim monster attack.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I was watching it this time around, I probably noticed this in the past, but the movie Prophecy had come out just the year before, 1979. And there is an Indian subplot or Native American subplot. There is eco horror. There's a monster. It's kind of like, I can't imagine. And that was a pretty big movie. And I can't imagine Corman didn't have that in his mind as well as
Probably.
Jaws.
Yeah, for sure. I might have even seen those on the same bill at the drive-in that night, for all I know.
Yeah, they were right up next to each other.
One of the notable actresses that's in the movie is Linda Shane, who plays Miss Salmon. And she's notable because she was a screenwriter, and her and Wynorski both co-wrote Screwballs, which is a pretty well-known, 80s teen sex comedy classic, But, I mean, that's one of the fun things with her. And her sequence always cracks me up, or the fact that once the humanoid, after he, destroys the DJ, he's going after her. If you watch carefully, you see that he grabs her top and pulls it off, and then it's back on, and then it's off, and then it's back on. Like they can't figure out whether, they want to keep it on or off during that part. So
Is this the Peters cut or the Corman cut?
right? Well, when it's on though, it's pulled up, so she is exposed. But there's a couple of shots where she's got nothing on at all, and it's like, and it goes back and forth between the two, which always cracks me up. I mean, there's a few things like that, like the sequence where the girl's driving the truck and you can see that the front window is completely removed out of there. It's stuff like that. That's always entertaining.
And let's pause for a second to acknowledge the name of the character, Miss Salmon. I think just the name is incredible. So for those who haven't seen the film, it's like a beauty contest, and everything is, of course, around the topic of salmon. Mm-hmm. And yeah, she's the beauty queen, Miss Salmon. I love it. Just the name, genius.
Should have been Miss Wet Fish.
Yeah.
Would have been about his equivalent.
We talked on our Turkey Day episode, we talked about kind of the progression of the monsters from Creature from the Black Lagoon to Horror Party Beach to this one. They're getting a little more explicit each time in terms of the other that wants our women.
Yeah.
And that theme that kind of plays through.
And maybe we should also mention another Corman film from way, way back, The Creature from the Haunted Sea.
Yep.
I just followed him on that recently.
For those who haven't seen it, pause the podcast for a second and go look at a picture of the monster. He looks like Cookie Monster, something similar. It's like one of the best monsters ever. It's so cute.
They all seem to be pushing that button of they're after our women, which I refuse to ascribe like any kind of motives about a message about racism or anything there, but I think that maybe the appeal for a lot of the audience was in that that button being pushed about these other men being after white women. Because they always seem to be white women in these movies as well.
Yeah, there's not a lot of diversity in this film, I will say that much. But that idea of the monster that can stand in for something that is non-white, I don't think Corman had a a message underlying it.
No,
It was just a reliable exploitation theme to use.
there's an undercurrent of emasculation there as well. They want our women sexually, and they are bigger and more powerful than us, and we can't have a fist fight on the beach with them over it or anything like that, or in a bar.
It gives people a reason to fight for it too. I mean, if it was just like these creatures are after all the ducks, on the planet, they'd be like, well, who gives a shit, like duck anyway. So it gives a reason for like men are protecting their women in a sense, so it gives it that reason for them to fight.
Though, all that said about the men protecting the women thing, one thing that is notable about this film is you do have some pretty strong female characters in there.
Yep.
I mean, Ann Turkel's character holds her own in the face of the machismo and the stuff like that, even making comments so far as well, I've got to make sure I'm at my best to hold up with you, or she makes lines like that. I mean, the girl that unfortunately crashes the truck, which happens to blow up as it falls off the thing, is, I mean, a lot of the lady characters in there do have some strength to them. They're not just damsel in distress. I mean, Doug McClure's wife, she completely, her whole sequence of protecting the kid and then fighting off the creature. I mean, she didn't need him to come and save her. She does it completely on her own. And
Mama Bear had it under control, man.
Exactly.
And also there's a great moment there that I think was completely intentional. Just this total cringe moment where I think he's the mayor, refers to Ann Turkel's character as great little scientist. Just gonna, I can't remember if they actually cut to her when he says that. And then there's also the brief shot of her dancing with the little short guy who's
the little guy with the mustache.
She looks like
she tells him off good too.
She
puts him in his place when they're sitting there examining them, and he's trying we got to keep this under wraps, and she's like, we're telling everybody. She's like, I've been telling you guys and warning you about this, and you weren't listening to me. Now it's too late. She totally takes control.
Well, and I feel like that is kind of the, uneasy as it is, the blend of Peters and Corman kind of working in a push-pull of her trying to get strong female. I mean, Miss Salmon manages to fight off her attacker and escapes. You got the Corman aspect and you got the Peters aspect. And I think that's kind of what gives this movie a bit of its heft. Agreed. Is that we do have equal measure of both.
It totally works. In my opinion, it does play off each other very well. You got, like you said, the strong characters, but then you got the other side where there's the hilarious and amazing puppet sequence. It's okay. I've been sanded. I mean, you got it, the most hilarious thing, and he's all like, it works every time, So it's like you get the lurid stuff, but then you also get the other side of the coin too, which I think is really cool.
I was just say, you look at most exploitation films, there's always super strong women in them. They're always completely kick-ass characters.
We're getting that here. Kind of going back to what John was saying, I think the biggest part of it is that, here's a creative that is having their work messed with against their will, then not being informed about it. And so it comes as a surprise. I think if, Corman had brought Barbara Peeters into his office and said, hey, look, we've had to make these changes. This is what we contracted for. Then maybe it would have been different. But I feel like it came as a surprise, and therefore it felt offensive to her.
I'm surprised she didn't remove her name from the film afterwards.
She tried to. She tried to have it, and he refused to have it done. Which is
Ann Turkel did too. She tried to get her name removed. Both of them.
In addition to this kind of being inspired by a lot of other films, it did go on to have a remake in 1996. Has anybody seen that one?
No.
I watched it again a couple of nights ago in preparation for this. I put myself through that. And it's a piece of shit. Really.
And why? Why exactly? Because I haven't seen it. Why is it so bad?
Well, first of all, I thought it was made for network TV because I saw it ages and ages ago. And then obviously upon viewing it again, just with the amount of there's not quite the same level of nudity in it, but there is some and some profanity. The violence is toned down considerably too. It's very obviously we've got this property. Let's do it. It's just very uninspired. Some of the same themes, but like all of the I don't want to say subtext because that's giving maybe a little too much credit, but just the underlying themes of the original are it's all just sort of lip service and very little more. It makes the original look much more sophisticated than it actually is. It's like, okay, here's the same material in the hands of it's the guy who did Blood Fist 5.
Yeah, that gives you an idea.
If Jonas, I think things that were done better to begin with that you wouldn't think really mattered that much. For instance, there's a body double for the female lead in this, and it's like, okay, you're not even trying here. Okay, they've got her sort of pretending to take her top off, and then a shot of some boobs. Okay, but then there's this long shot of this woman running into the water naked, and the actress in question has sort of like shoulder length blonde hair, or just past shoulder length blonde hair. There's this naked woman with long straight black hair. She could be Asian running the water, and it's like, good God, you're not even trying.
You're like, who is that?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, this was back when Corman was redoing a lot of his titles. This is one of many, and Corman is executive producing this one as well. But it is very much kind of a retread. While there is a toxin that's being dumped in the water, it's a leftover from a super soldier experiment. So the military is involved.
Oh boy!
And they were trying to make like amphibian super soldiers. So they've kind of lost the whole salmon subplot, and it's much cuter. Like there's a Beverly Hills 90210 feel to the younger characters. Robert Carradine is our lead, and he's still clearly trying to shake off his Revenge of the Nerds stigma. And Mark Ralston from Aliens, when he plays Vasquez's boyfriend.
Drake.
I don't think it's as garbage as John is is making it out to be, but it's certainly no patch on the original. I think that it's I remember coming across it when I couldn't find Humanoids from the Deep on video back in the day, and going, well, I guess I'll watch this instead. And it is nowhere near as much fun. And I think that's kind of coming back to the 1980 film. That's the spirit of this movie, is that it's fun. It's harmless, fun. It's a big, crazy, energetic monster movie.
Even for people who don't like horror, because I rewatched the film with my boyfriend, who's really not into horror, but he thought it was quite entertaining. Yeah, he was criticizing the fact that there wasn't that much of a screenplay and that the actors weren't that good, and they wasn't like a very profound movie. But yeah, he thought it was entertaining, and that's saying quite a lot, I think. Yeah.
Well, for God's sake, don't show them the remake then.
Yeah.
Because it's basically it's just it's the same thing, just done in such an inferior fashion.
Oh man.
Really, and it's funny, you're talking about 90210 there. The despite the fact that the original was 1980 and the remake was 96, I think.
96, yeah.
The 96 one is a much more 1980s kind of film, and like 1980s in the absolute worst sense. Just that entire aesthetic. Whereas the original owes a lot more to the 70s really than it does to its own decade.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it definitely feels like it is more of a 70s film. Ryan's referred several times to the Shout Factory release, and they are going to be putting it out on UHD Blu-ray later in February. A lot of the extras are being ported over. There's going to be a new commentary by Russell Dyball. So well worth checking out for sure. Let's circle back around some final thoughts on our movie for today.
If you haven't seen it, please do. It's fun. It's got awesome monsters. Like, I don't know what else to say. I mean, that's all you really need, right? The 3 Bs, as Damien said. That's all you need. Coming from a girl, I mean, even.
Ryan?
I mean, yeah, my wife just summed it up the best. I mean, it delivers on all that stuff if that's what you're looking for. And it is a ton of fun. And it's, I mean, it's a kind of a singular picture in what it is, as far as, to me, it's kind of the apex of that whole sea creature, sea monster type thing. I mean, you're not going to top it. It's pretty much that is the best.
John?
echoing that as well, and it really sort of in those respects, it really is sort of the epitome of a Corman picture. It's just built to deliver certain things, but it delivers them so much better than so many others. I mean, so many that you've forgotten about from that same era that tried to do the same thing and just completely fell on their ass. I couldn't go back to it as many times as I have, to the point where like it's kind of embarrassing how much dialogue I could recite from this movie.
And John, you said you had a memento you wanted to.
Unlike most horror fans, I'm not much of a collector. Well, look at Jen and Ryan there. There's a certain discrepancy here. Who knows what the hell's lurking in the shadows behind Damien there? I do have
A lot.
This was another writer at Rue Morgue, Claire Horsnell. She's one of our best. Among her many talents is crocheting. Although she's British, so it's crocheting, of course. For her. But she made me a humanoid from the deep, crocheted humanoid. Yeah.
Wow.
And this actually is the second thing. This all began when she. I don't know how this woman has any time on her hands. She's actually a lawyer on top of it all. But this began when she crocheted a leather face and posted a picture of it on Facebook. And this was just after my Phantasm book had come out, and I completely jokingly said, I'll be expecting a tall man. And the next time I went by the Rue Morgue office, I said, oh, Claire dropped this off for you.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
wow, that is
incredible.
Cool.
And
boy.
there was this was first, and then hang on, I'm moving this the wrong way. And then about, I don't know, 6 months later, I came by the office. Oh, Claire dropped something off for you, and here's a humanoid from the deep.
That is
Amazing.
So cool.
That is
These
so
are
cool. Wow.
two treasured items for me, and they Vanessa, they go on my tree every Christmas actually.
That's
Lower
awesome.
branches.
Very cool.
So there you go. And
Vanessa, I know that's a tough act to follow, but final thoughts?
Well, it's a film about sea creatures, so that in itself is a good reason to see the film. And on top of that, it's the best sea creatures ever, even some of the best monsters ever, I think. Their look is so cool, and I really love the locations as well. That's also a really good reason to see it. It really elevates the film to an entirely new level. And it has such a good pacing. It's well made, has a good atmosphere. So, yeah. Go see it if you haven't.
And Damien.
It's almost a perfect monster movie. You know, it gets to the point quickly. It trims all the fat. It's tightly edited. All the actors do a fantastic job. There's likable characters. There's characters you root for. There's characters you don't. So and the monsters are completely revealed in the light, so you can see everything. I mean, it has everything you could ever want in a monster movie. It's literally almost a perfect monster movie made.
Absolutely.
That's great. Yeah, I think one of the things I like about it as well is, in addition to it being a perfect monster movie, as with many of Corman's efforts, there's a great story behind the movie as well. As we were talking about, you know, just the kind of its birthing, as it were, and how this movie came to be. And I think that's maybe what also keeps bringing us back, is to watch it through different eyes as we get older, is to see, oh, you know what, as Vanessa was pointing out, like maybe we didn't need these elements, and these elements are very strong. And I don't think every movie makes those kind of demands and has that kind of pays back in terms of dividends on repeat viewings. This one really does seem to do that. It really does seem to have new things to say for a new audience. And you can enjoy it.
Test of time.
Yeah, you can enjoy it on the surface level, but then also there's some other things being explored beneath the surface. You see what I did there? Thanks, everybody. This was a great conversation. Great way to kick off the year, and looking forward to having you all on again very soon.
Good to meet the people I hadn't met before as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
I mean,
great to meet you. Great to
Bring
meet you,
everybody
Vanessa.
in.
And John, great to
Yes.
meet you. I've been a fan of your work in Rue Morgue for a long time. So
Great
great
to
to meet
very
you.
kind.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.